We are the group for the Ministry of Social Development. So Ministry of Social Development has a goal of helping people become independent, safe and strong. So for the 2015-16 fiscal year, their vote budget was about $20 billion. And within MSD, there are 7 different organisations, and there's a strong emphasis on focus on education and employment. So in terms of the leadership structure, we have Paul Bennett, who's the Minister for Social Housing, Anne Tolley for Social Development, Nikki Kay for Youth, Maggie Berry for Senior Citizens, Joe Goodhue for Social Development, and Nikki Wagner for Disability. And the Chief Executive is Brendan Boyle. So the layout of this presentation will go is that Fraser will talk about the accountability of MSD and who they report to. Gemma will talk about the non-financial performance of MSD. Jiawei will talk about the role of MSD in the labour market. I'll be comparing MSD against other OECD nations. And then overall, we will conclude our presentation and also answer the questions asked us by the other groups. I will now pass you on to Fraser, who will talk about the accountability of MSD and who they report to.
Because the Ministry of Social Development is a governmental organisation, for the purpose of financial reporting, it is considered to be a public benefit entity, and as such, all of its financial statements are prepared in accordance with the Public Finance Act of 1989, which required them to be prepared in accordance with GAAP as a Tier 1 organisation, as well as the International Public Sector Accounting Standards, to name a few. These reports aim to give a general overview on what the Ministry has accomplished throughout the period and include everything from budget to employee entitlements and attempt to provide details on all its activities, both financial and non-financial, which have taken place for the Ministry within the period. The auditor for the Ministry is the Auditor General, who appointed Audit New Zealand to conduct the audit, which found that the financial reports represent the true and fair view of the Ministry. The financial year for the Ministry of Social Development begins on the 1st of July and lasts until the 30th of June, and as a public benefit entity, releases a yearly annual report reporting on all its activities within the period. With this purpose in mind, the annual report shows how it achieved its purpose for this year, giving information on its performance targets and what is achieved in the year towards its goal. One such goal is to reduce long-term welfare dependency in New Zealand, also known as Result 1. The target is to reduce the number of people who continuously receive job seeker support for longer than 12 months by 30%, beginning in April 2012 with 78,000 currently receiving this support, with the intention to reduce this down to 55,000 by June 2017. They mentioned their plan to do this, which is to help support people back into employment again by investing support who will make the biggest difference. In this financial year, it reduced the number by just under 2,000, down to 65,555 people. However, within the report, there is very little detail about how they actually plan on going about this, just making vague mentions to investing support in the right places. You're not explaining details such as how much money, exactly where the money is going to be invested, and why they believe the money is well suited to where it's being funneled, given the appearance of an intransparent organisation. In addition to this, the government has released a new goal, which is to be achieved by June 2018. And this target, they aim to have a 25% reduction in the total number of people receiving a main benefit, down from 295,000 in June 2014, down to 220,000 by June 2018. While they have announced this target, they have little to no mention again as to how they actually intend to meet the target, especially on top of the already present goal. Again, by giving off the idea that the organisation is not very accountable for their actions, as there are a lot of promises and targets, yet very little detail as to how they actually plan to justify and achieve these goals. Within the report, the Ministry includes what it has done to better the organisational health and capability, like how they are now allowing doctors to lodge medical certificates with them electronically, which they believe will remove more than 400,000 transactions every year from its service centres, as part of their plans to make the business processes for transactional services more efficient, while making it easier for clients to apply for financial assistance and support. They have an idea in place to make the Ministry more efficient. There is almost no mention of any financial information within the report about this. Is this going to save money? How much money is going to be saved? Are people going to lose their jobs since they no longer have to process these transactions? If not, what are they going to be doing instead? This at least partially answers much further on within the report, with a forecast of the upcoming financial statements, and these are prepared on several assumptions. But the activities of the Ministry will remain largely the same as the previous year, that personnel costs will continue to be based on the 10,118 full-time equivalent staff positions, but operating costs are based on historical experience, with the general pattern being expected to continue, that there would be no significant events or changes that have a material impact, And with these, the Ministry has already released some details of its probable budget to the public, which is a good start to promote transparency, but ultimately is not enough, given little evidence that the Ministry is held accountable for their actions. And now I'm going to pass you on to Gemma, who's going to talk about the performance with some of the targets that the Ministry of Social Development has set.
Today I'm going to compare the Ministry of Social Development's non-financial performance from 2014 to 2015 based on information found in their annual reports. From 2011, the Ministry of Social Development has set better public service targets that their Chief Executive is responsible for. These include reducing the number of people who have been on the job seeker benefit for more than 12 months, increased participation in early childhood education, increase infant immunisation rates and reduce the incidences of rheumatic fever, and reduce the number of assaults on children. Other targets they have that their subsidiary organisations contribute to include increasing the proportion of 18-year-olds with NCEA Level 2 or equivalent qualification, reduce reoffending, and reduce the rates of total crime, violent crime, and youth crime. For Result 1, this target includes reducing the number of people who are reliant on the job seeker support benefit for more than 12 months by 55,000 by 2017. By the end of 2014, this figure fell from 74,559 to 67,531. By the end of 2015, it had fallen another 1,976, or almost 3%, to 65,555. The graph on the next slide illustrates this. The Ministry of Education has taken the lead on this. The Ministry of Social Development has contributed to the target of increasing the rate of participation in early childhood education to 98% by 2016 by subsidising the cost of early childhood education for children aged between 18 months and 3 years old and through the Ministry's Family Start program. By the end of 2014, 95.9% of children had participated in early childhood education, and by the end of 2015 it increased to 96.2% participation. The graph on the next slide shows the progress for this. The Ministry of Health has taken the lead on this one. The Ministry of Social Development contributed to the targets of increasing infant immunisation rates and reducing the incidences of rheumatic fever through gateway assessments and the Family Start program. Gateway assessments occur with every child that goes into the care of child, youth and family and those who are at risk for this. By the end of 2014, the immunisation rate for 8 months old was 91.6%, and the incidences of rheumatic fever was 4.3 cases per 100,000 people. By the end of 2015, the immunisation rate was 92.9% for 8 months old, with 3 cases of rheumatic fever per 100,000. The graph on the next slide shows the progress for this. The Ministry of Social Development is the lead agency on the target of reducing the number of assaults on our children. The target set in June 2012 was to reduce current numbers by 5% by 2017. In 2014, the number of physical assaults barely changed from 3,181 to 3,178. In 2015, physical abuse was confirmed for 3,118 children. The graph on the next slide shows progress up until 2014. To increase the proportion of 18-year-olds with NCEA Level 2 or equivalent qualification to 85% by 2017, the Ministry of Social Development started youth service. In 2014, 78.6% of 18-year-olds reached this target. This result increased by 2.6% from 2014 to 81.2% in 2015. In regards to the crime figures, the Ministry of Social Development helped contribute to these targets by providing programs such as Fresh Start to more than 1,600 people. 5,633 Youth Justice Family Group conferences were also held as an early intervention for reoffending. In 2014, reoffending rates fell from 27.2% to 26.3%. I could find no information on this target's progress for 2015. The original target for total crime reduction was 15% by 2017, and in the 2015 annual report, it had reached 18% reduction. In early 2015, a new target was introduced for total crime reduction of 20% by June 2018. The rate of youth crime fell from 265 per 10,000 people to 228 per 10,000 people, which is a 14% decrease. Since 2011, when the original targets were set, youth crime had fallen by 37%, which has exceeded the original 25% reduction by 2015. The original target of 20% reduction in violent crime by 2017 has no other mention other than the original target, which was set in 2011, so I've made the assumption there is little progress towards this goal. I'll now pass you along to Jiawei, who is going to talk about the role of Ministry of Social Development in the labour market.
My topic is the role of Ministry of Social Development in the labour market. It focuses on the supply side of the labour market, matching people looking for work and employers, and improving people's education through targeted programs. The ministry works with above agencies to produce working paper, for example, policy recommendations. The treasurer, for example, information for living wage. Ministry of Business Innovation and Employment, for example, easy-to-read contracts, and Inland Revenue Department, employment incentives for sole parents will tax. Our work done is to encourage people into work, lead to independence and welfare decreased. This is a chart from Status New Zealand. Overtime trade has been increased despite New Zealand having high immigration, and we will look this by gender. Male labor force participation is minimum intervention by Ministry of Social Development. After structural reforms, 1980s trade is flawed, and an area of focus by the ministry was to increase female labor force participation. Decreasing number of discouraged women from looking for work, and Compass program 1994 helping sole parents into employment. In 1989, universal funding for children care, for example, Oscar program, and the effects of these policies take time as these change the structure of labor market, and passes on to Steven who compared performance the Ministry of Social Development and OECD countries.
The Ministry of Social Development is usually the government department that's concerned about promoting the equality and opportunity of its citizens. So there's no comparable metrics, and it's quite difficult even if you use ones like expenditure to GDP ratio. This is because in OECD countries they have different styles of delivering services, so this can either be done through reduced taxation or increased spending. So what we did was that we compared the observed outcomes of certain policies. Okay, in choosing what to compare, there was 7 organisations within MSD, and they mainly focus on employment and education. So the goal, which is consistent with the goal of MSD, which is to support the development of strong and independent people. So the reason why we chose OECD data was that we knew it would be relatively comparable and relatively easy to access. So all the data that we compiled was from 2014, and all the averages calculated is from all OECD countries. However, for the graph illustrations, we only chose to compare it against the top 15 countries based on nominal GDP. So the first thing we looked at was the labour force participation. So for the OECD, it's roughly at about 72%, whereas New Zealand's at 79%. So the labour force is the number of working age people, which is from 15 to 64-year-olds. The participation aspect looks at the number of people employed and also unemployed, but also looking for work and ready to start. So the reason why we chose this metric was that it illustrates the health of the economy and shows any possible structural issues the labour market might have in the future. Given New Zealand's positive result, this is a good thing for MSD because this is consistent with their goal of decreasing long-term dependency on welfare and increasing the labour market participation. So the next one we looked at was youth unemployment. So the OECD average is about 13%, whereas New Zealand's at 14.7%. So this looks at the number of unemployed 15 to 24-year-olds as a percentage of the labour force. What this means is that they're without work but available for work and have been actively looking in the last 4 weeks. So the reason why we chose this was that Stats New Zealand has said that youth unemployment has high social and economic costs. And the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research has called it a one-way trapdoor into crime and poverty. So MSC realises that this is an issue. So in 2015, they set up a cross-agency support programs which looks at how to support youth in terms of employment, budgeting, and other essential skills. They trialled this in South Dunedin and was able to reduce the number of people dependent on welfare as their main source of income by 165 people. The next one we looked at was the percentage of 15 to 29-year-olds who are not in education, training, or employment. So the OECD average is about 15.6%, whereas New Zealand's at about 13%. Well, this is relatively positive because Treasury has stated that the long-term effects of being in this category is that they're more likely to be dependent on welfare throughout their life and less likely to be employed. The OECD has also said that these people are more likely to be socially excluded and unable to improve their lives. So in terms of measuring the success, this is in 2012, MSC launched some youth services which looked at decreasing the dependency on long-term welfare. So since there are less of these people in this NEET bracket, we can conclude that the programs launched in 2012 were successful because now there are less people dependent on long-term welfare.
Our conclusion is that the reporting by the Ministry of Social Development, whilst legally compliant, shows poor accountability, making the Ministry somewhat of an enigma. The Ministry of Social Development's non-financial performance from 2014 to 2015 was mostly positive, aside from slow progress made on Result 4, which was reducing the number of assaults on children, and violent crime, which had no mention whatsoever of any improvements. This may represent a possible attempt to hide an increase or lack of results from the actions they are taking to reduce violent crime in New Zealand. When the Ministry of Social Development intervenes in the labour market, they have a large impact. When looked at globally, Ministry of Social Development's performance in the labour market is above the OECD average. We will now take turns answering questions from the other groups.
The education group asked the question, how will the rates of unemployment change over the next 5 years, and how will the Ministry of Social Development go about it? The prediction of the unemployment rates is something which is generally quite finicky to talk about due to its nature. It's in the future, and as a result, the predictions only work if nothing of note happens throughout the period that is either expected or it just doesn't happen at all. In the last measured quarter, the first quarter of 2016, the unemployment rate was at 5.7%. The latest forecast is for 2020, so not quite 5 years like the question asked, but the unemployment rate, if it continues to follow the current trend, is expected to drop down to 5.2%. For the second part of the question, Ministry of Social Development has not actually mentioned anything specifically, as reducing unemployment is both the main goal and a side effect of the plans which have already been put in place by the Ministry, such as Result 1, which is covered by both myself and
the health sector group was, why is our youth unemployment higher than the OECD average? So part of this was just an aftermath of the GFC, and this was a global trend around the world. However, we found that one reason was that in 2008, the Labour government decided to scrap the 16 to 17-year-old youth minimum wage and replace it with a new entrance wage. However, this was largely ignored by employers, and they just put the 16 to 17-year-old straight away on the adult minimum wage. This led to an increase of 28% for wages and for this age group. By raising the minimum wage for this age group, by 2010, this led to about 20 to 40% more unemployment for youth. The main reason was that employers are able to choose from a slack labour market, and they're thinking, why should I hire a youth that's less experienced, more risky, but then I have to pay them about the same amount of money as someone who's more experienced, has better education, and it's less risk. So both the OECD, Treasury, and Ministry of Business agree that this policy actually drove youth unemployment higher. So as we see on this graph, the green line is the expected youth unemployment based on the long-term relationship of adult unemployment and youth unemployment. As we see in the black line, in 2008, this was when the Labour government decided to abolish the youth unemployment, and we saw that there was a breakdown in between the expected youth unemployment and actual youth unemployment. So this highlights the structural issues that Ministry of Social Development is currently facing in terms of having to deal with youth unemployment.
The education group assessed the question, what are the factors in play to increase labour market participation? To answer this question, first thing we need to know is New Zealand already has a high labour force participation rate of 79%. This is the second highest rate of the world. In February 2014, New Zealand introduced Work Ability Assessment tool. Work Ability Assessment is a medical test used to decide whether jobless welfare claimants are entitled to sickness benefits. The ministry also changed the job seeker support requirements in looking for full-time work if no children or children is older than 14 years, and changed the sole parent support requirements in need prepare to work, whose children younger than 5 years, part-time, whose need part-time, whose children between 5 and 14 years. This change increased people looking for job, resulted in participation rate increasing.
This question was from the health sector group. What are your suggestions to improving each of the areas you looked at: employment, education, welfare, and supporting youth? To improve employment levels, putting more funds into the youth services to deter long-term welfare dependency and encourage youth to continue education and or find employment early on is necessary for long-term success. Reducing the job seeker support benefit for those who have been on it for more than 12 months may encourage some of them to get a job, although it could also be counterproductive in the sense some people may struggle without buttons. To improve education, visits at high schools from guest speakers such as doctors, nurses, lawyers and similar may encourage students to explore an occupation they had not previously considered themselves to be capable of. Tailoring job search services to reflect the different skills of different clients' needs may encourage workers to stay with a job long term. For example, if a person gets a job they absolutely hate or find impossible to do due to an injury from when they were younger or childcare restraints, this may prevent them from staying at the job permanently. This can help combat long-term welfare dependency. To help support youth, creating more youth housing will create more opportunities for a safe environment for youth to learn valuable life skills and encourage them to achieve, as they will all be working towards the same goals.